I didn't know the name Sackler when my world fell apart. Most of us didn't. We knew the pain, we knew the pills, but we didn't know the family pulling the strings. It started with a doctor's words, "This will help." They said it was safe. They said it was different. They said it wasn't addictive. But what they gave us wasn't medicine. It was a fuse, and my community became the explosion. At first, it seemed harmless, just another prescription, just another pill. But I watched it spread like fire. From my neighbor's medicine cabinet to my best friend's locker, from our parents to our children. And as the addiction grew, the Sacklers stayed hidden. No TV interviews, no press conferences, no accountability. They let Purdue Pharma take the blame, while they quietly raked in billions from the shadows. We didn't know their faces. We didn't know their names. But their choices reached into every corner of America. Every small town, every city, every home. I didn't learn the name Sackler in a classroom or in a museum wing with their name carved in marble. I learned it at funerals, from obituaries, from standing over the graves of people I loved. This isn't just a story about a family. This is the story of how they turned suffering into an empire. This is the story of how their invisibility was their greatest weapon. And this is the story of how my world, and so many others, was destroyed. This is the Sackler family. This is the opioid crisis. It started small. One prescription for a bad back, one pill for an injured knee, one refill after surgery. That's how it crept into our homes, quiet, harmless, wrapped in the authority of doctors and the promise of modern medicine. The Sacklers built Purdue Pharma into a machine designed for one thing, selling pain relief at any cost. They didn't just market OxyContin. They engineered a movement. They paid doctors to attend pain management conferences, where addiction risks were downplayed and Oxy was pushed as safe. They trained sales reps to tell doctors that less than 1% of patients became addicted, a statistic they knew was never proven. They created patient brochures, glossy and reassuring, claiming Oxy had a special coating that made it less addictive. That coating did nothing. The campaign was relentless. Purdue didn't just target doctors in wealthy cities. They went after rural towns, working-class families, places where pain was a daily reality. Places like mine. We weren't undertreated like they claimed. We were oversold. We were test subjects in the Sacklers' greatest experiment. How many people can you hook if you call it medicine? And while we swallowed those pills, the Sacklers swallowed profits. Billions poured in. And every time a prescription was written, they didn't see patients. They saw customers. The beginning of the opioid crisis wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. It was strategy. And the Sacklers wrote the playbook. At first, Oxy dulled the pain. It gave relief. It gave hope. But soon, the relief became a need, and the hope became a trap. The Sacklers didn't just sell a pill, they sold dependency. And dependency spread like wildfire. People I loved chased refills like their lives depended on it. And in a way, they did. Their bodies craved Oxy like oxygen, but prescriptions ran out. Insurance refused to cover endless refills. Doctors, pressured by the DEA, began cutting patients off. And that's when the spiral deepened. Because once the Oxy stopped, the sickness started. Sweats, vomiting, shaking, bones that felt like they were breaking from the inside. Withdrawal wasn't just uncomfortable, it was unbearable. When Oxy wasn't there to silence the agony, people searched for something else. Something cheaper. Something stronger. That's when heroin took its place. I watched neighbors, people who once worked 9-to-5 jobs, coached Little League, sang in church choirs, end up on street corners chasing a needle because Oxy had lit the fire. Heroin wasn't the last stop. Then came fentanyl, a synthetic opioid so powerful that a dose the size of a grain of sand could kill. The spiral wasn't accidental. It was a pipeline. From doctor's office, to Oxy prescription, to heroin, to fentanyl, to the grave. And at every stage of that pipeline, the Sacklers profited. They built a system where pain led to pills. Pills led to addiction. Addiction led to overdoses. And overdoses led to more patients seeking treatment with the very drugs Purdue pushed next. It wasn't just addiction, it was a business model. And the spiral into heroin and fentanyl wasn't the failure of Oxy, it was its legacy. Numbers don't bleed, don't cry, don't bury their children. But behind every statistic, there was a face, a family, a story. From the moment OxyContin hit the market in 1996, the death toll started climbing. At first, it was a trickle, then a flood, then a tsunami that swallowed entire towns. In places like West Virginia, the overdose rate soared higher than anywhere else in the nation. In Cabell County alone, more than 1,800 overdoses struck in a single year. Over 150 never made it home. That wasn't a statistic. That was neighbors, coworkers, classmates, wiped out in a matter of months. And it wasn't just Appalachia. In New Hampshire, one of the smallest states in America, opioids became the leading cause of death for adults under 50. In Ohio, morgues ran out of space. Counties had to rent refrigerated trailers just to store the dead. By 2017, prescription opioids, including OxyContin, were killing more than 17,000 Americans a year. By 2021, the total annual opioid death toll had exploded past 80,000. And since the start of the crisis, more than 500,000 Americans have died from opioid overdoses. 500,000 lives, 500,000 funerals, 500,000 empty chairs at dinner tables. These weren't addicts or statistics. They were mothers, fathers, sons, daughters. Veterans who came home from war and never escaped the pain. Workers who got injured on the job and never made it back. Teenagers who thought it was just one pill and never woke up. When the lawsuits came, it felt like hope. Maybe finally the truth would catch up to the Sacklers. Maybe the families would see accountability. Maybe justice would be more than a word. But justice never came. In 2007, Purdue Pharma admitted guilt. They pleaded guilty to misleading the public about OxyContin's risks. The company paid $600 million in fines, a massive number on paper. But for the Sacklers, it was pocket change, a speed bump on the road to billions. By 2019, Purdue was drowning in lawsuits from states, counties, and tribes across America. More than 3,000 lawsuits accused the company, and the Sacklers, of fueling the deadliest drug epidemic in U.S. history. But instead of facing trial, the Sacklers pulled their final trick: bankruptcy. They used the courts not as a place for justice, but as a shield. In 2025, a controversial settlement emerged. The Sacklers agreed to pay around $7.4 billion over time. The money would go to states and communities to fight the epidemic, to build treatment centers, to help survivors. Think about that. 500,000 Americans dead, communities destroyed, families shattered, and the family most responsible walked away untouched, still billionaires, their fortune tucked into offshore trusts. They didn't pay with their freedom, they paid with their money. And the money wasn't even enough to match the scale of the damage. They didn't lose everything. We did. The settlement didn't close the book on the opioid crisis. It wrote a new chapter in American history, that in this country, if you have enough money, you don't just escape justice. You can buy it. The reality is this settlement is bullshit. The Sackler family is only covering $1.6 billion of the total. They still own Mundi Pharma in England. The Sackler family is still worth billions. The government did what it does best. It accomplished nothing. The Sacklers wanted history to remember them as healers, as patrons of art, science, and education. They poured millions into museums, libraries, and universities, not to save lives, but to save their name. They thought philanthropy could buy redemption. They thought marble plaques could erase the blood on their hands. But you can't scrub away 500,000 graves. You can't hide a national epidemic behind a museum wing. The true legacy of the Sacklers isn't written on gallery walls. It's written on death certificates. They didn't just create addicts, they created a generation defined by loss. And the devastation didn't stop at America's borders. In Canada, OxyContin was so aggressively marketed that some provinces saw opioid prescription rates as high as the US, with Indigenous communities hit especially hard. In Australia, Purdue targeted doctors with the same false claims of low addiction risk, fueling a wave of overdoses that continues today. Even in Europe, the Sacklers used their museum ties and medical influence to push oxy into new markets, spreading the epidemic like a virus carried in pill bottles. The Sackler legacy is not American, it is global. A worldwide campaign of addiction, dressed up as medicine, exported to every place where profit outweighed caution. That is the legacy of the Sackler family. Not art, not medicine, not philanthropy, but death. I never asked to know the Sackler name, but now I'll never forget it. But their empire was built on blood, and blood always leaves a stain. They wanted to be remembered for art galleries and marble wings. But history will remember the graves, the obituaries, the shattered families who never got justice. And here's the truth. The opioid crisis didn't just end when Purdue declared bankruptcy. The overdoses never stopped. The funerals never stopped. The pain never stopped. Their money may have bought immunity, but it didn't buy forgiveness. This isn't just history. It's happening right now. Every day, another life lost. Every day, another family broken. And every day, the Sacklers live free, their fortune intact, their empire protected. So remember this, the Sacklers didn't just profit off pain, they profited off people like me, off families like yours, off communities across the world. This is our story, this is their empire, this is Money Toxic. Please like and subscribe to support content like this.